Good afternoon. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good afternoon. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good afternoon, and welcome to Advocacy Anywhere, powered by American Jewish Committee. Advocacy Anywhere is AJC's digital platform that enables you to engage with AJC's global expertise, content, and advocacy from wherever you are. Today's program is brought to you in partnership with the National Governors Association. There's no denying that hyperpartisanship and polarization are ever present in America and present real roadblocks to problem solving and progress. We're delighted to be joined today by the Chair and Vice Chair of the National Governors Association, Governor Spencer Cox of Utah, and Governor Jared Polis of Colorado, for a wide-ranging, bipartisan conversation on the importance of their initiative, Disagree Better, and how these nationwide efforts hope to reduce partisan animosity and foster healthy debate. Moderating our conversation is AJC Chief Field Operations Officer, Melanie Marin-Pell. After we hear from our guests, time permitting, we will take your questions. You may email your question to questions@ajc.org, questions is plural, or you can use the Q&A feature in Zoom. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Governor Cox and Governor Polis, for joining us today. Governor Cox, I'd like to start with you. I read a quote from you where you said, "We have to be able to disagree without hating each other if we're actually going to solve problems. I truly believe the future of our democracy depends on our ability to engage in healthy conflict, and it starts with listening, asking questions, and attacking ideas, not people." So that's such an important quote, and I think it's such a great place to start. Can you tell us a little bit about the Disagree Better initiative and what you hope to accomplish?
Sure, Melanie, and thank you for having me. I'm especially excited to be here with Governor Jared Polis, a friend and somebody who actually embodies everything that we're talking about today. So look, as I was looking for an initiative as the chair, as we do in this bipartisan organization, Republicans and Democrats working together, I was looking at all the biggest problems facing our nation and realized that we couldn't solve any of them if we hate each other, if we can't have real debate and a real, I think a real competition of ideas is something that matters and hasn't mattered historically. And so landed on this idea of trying to depolarize our country and disagreeing better. I want to be clear, this is not just another civility initiative. It's not just about getting along, although we need more of that for sure. We definitely need more kindness. It really is about disagreeing in the right ways. Healthy conflict and conflict resolution are very important to the survival of our constitutional republic, and believe that this effort Did
we lose Governor Cox?
Well, why don't Melanie come back? Why don't you go ahead and ask me a question?
Okay.
Appreciate. I'm sure he'll be right.
Okay, and we'll pick back up with him when he's able to return. So Governor Polis, picking up on that idea, there's another quote I'd like to share. Thomas Jefferson, in his first inaugural address, said, "Every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle." And we know that there are beliefs such as this ability to engage in the marketplace of ideas that are at the core of American democracy. And yet we've found ourselves at a moment where political opponents really are viewed as enemies. And it's the sort of heads I win, tail you lose, zero sum. What can you add to how you see us being able to lower the temperature in our national discourse?
Well, one thing that was a great quote. One thing to note is that, while John Adams was president, Thomas Jefferson was vice president. Before the 12th Amendment, we actually had the runner-up for president become the vice president. So we the founding fathers inherently tried to build that kind of disagree better concept into our governing document. It worked out better for continuity of government to have, the running mate rather than the one that was defeated. But I think at the end of the day, to show that common goal for making America an even better place and understanding that we might have different visions and respecting and listening and learning from one another. It's okay to disagree with one another. In fact, that's what our nation was founded on. There were profound disagreements among the founding fathers, but it's really about assuming the good intent of others and that we each care about America in our own way, and we try to forge a common path forward where we can.
Thank you. And Governor Cox, we lost you for a moment. So if you want to pick back up, you were talking a little bit about the Disagree Better initiative and how it's more than just a civility effort.
Yeah, and my apologies for getting disconnected, but really we're taking the very best research that exists in our institutions today. We've been collaborating with Stanford and Dartmouth and Harvard and Duke and other places that are really doing the research here about how to depolarize our country, how to help people come together again to disagree without hating each other, to try to remove some of the contempt and looking at the drivers of that and then trying to get the best information out to Americans and to politicians who are engaging in this space. I'm very lucky to have someone like Jared Polis and other governors who are really interested in this issue and doing more. And so you'll hear more from us over the next 6 or 7 months as we head into the next most divisive election of our lifetimes, trying to remind people, help Americans remember that we can do this without tearing each other apart.
And if we can talk a little bit about we would welcome your assessment or analysis or thoughts on how we as a country have gotten to this moment. We know we didn't get here overnight. We know we live in a 24-hour news cycle. We have cable news networks that create their own echo chambers. And now in the last, however many years, we know the role that social media plays, and social media platforms have replaced, especially for people in younger generations, traditional media. How does that factor in? And as we are trying to reimagine civil discourse, when people are deriving information and gathering information from sources that are echo chambers, how can we break through some of that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's something we think about a lot, kind of how we got here and where we're headed. I would maybe recommend an amazing piece by researcher Jonathan Haidt, who he wrote in The Atlantic. It was titled "Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid," and it's in there he talks about the very things that you've mentioned. I'll go back, since Governor Polis brought up kind of the founders, to something that John Adams said. He said, without the virtues of humility, patience, and moderation, we are all ravenous political beasts. And so I think about those political virtues, and I don't know that there are many politicians today that we would describe with patience, humility, and moderation. But in all of us, we do have this ravenous political beast, and the incentive structure has certainly lined up, especially again over the past 10, 20 years, to drive that kind of natural polarization that exists in all of us, that the founders actually set up this entire system to prevent from happening, right? They didn't want anybody to get too much power because they knew this underlying theme of kind of the natural human being in all of us. But what has happened is cable news, I think, is definitely where it started. This hacking of our brains using contempt to get us outraged. And outrage is very addictive, and they figured out how to do that constantly, right? Those people are trying to destroy our country. Those people hate democracy. Those people want to destroy the Constitution. And now politicians have certainly taken hold of that. And what it does is it allows the more extreme voices to come to the forefront. We're much more, we love, everybody slows down for a train wreck or a car wreck, right? It's kind of natural to us. This has been exacerbated by social media, where the algorithms themselves tend to lift up the most polarizing, the most crazy, the loudest voices in the room, and that leads to what one researcher has referred to as affect polarization, which is very dangerous. It's not that Republicans and Democrats are that far apart when it comes to actual policies. When you interview them separately, you find out the gap is fairly small, but it's what Republicans think Democrats believe and what Democrats think Republicans believe. That perception gap is incredibly dangerous, and it's growing. Because again, these polarized voices get lifted up. If you just watch cable news, you think every Republican is like Marjorie Taylor Greene or something like that, or every Democrat is like AOC, or just pick whomever you want. But that's not the case, but we think it is. And when we think the other side is willing to violate constitutional norms, then our side is willing to violate constitutional norms to protect against that. And it's this downward spiral that can be very destructive. So yes, it's all of those things that have led us to this moment.
And Melanie, if I can just build off, Melanie, if I can just build off of that for a moment, I would. There's a great writer on anti-Semitism in the Atlantic, Yair Rosenberg. I suggest you follow him on Twitter or Atlantic. But one thing that he points out, really, in a way, what Governor Cox was talking about is people on the left are good at calling out anti-Semitism on the right. People at the right are good at calling out anti-Semitism on the left. But that's not very effective because you're calling it out among those who don't listen to you anyway. So what takes true courage and is most important is for people on the right to call out anti-Semitism on the right, for people on the left to call it on the left. I mean, to call it out everywhere, of course, but realizing that people are more likely to listen to you if you are part of that. So I would encourage everybody to look at what Yair wrote. But I think calling out the other side is an easy thing in politics. Calling out your own side, or in a moral absolute way, saying anti-Semitism, bigotry, simply wrong, no matter who does it, and no matter what their other opinions are. That is the moral high ground that I hope that more leaders aspire to.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And, I think it's both calling it out within your own party and then standing together as you do through the National Governors Association and say, we can stand together in a bipartisan fashion and speak to the values that we share. I think that is so important. And the more we can elevate these voices, because again, then it goes back to what Governor Cox was saying about how do we sort of break the algorithms? We're all sort of defined by the algorithms that drive our information cycles, and we have to find ways through that. Governor Polis, I want to stick on this theme for a moment. So you referenced anti-Semitism, which invariably is on the minds of our audience. It's certainly been front and center for AJC. It always has been, but we're in a really, really dangerous moment in Jewish history post October 7th. And we know that there are political extremes on both the left and right that pose threats to the Jewish community. So we've seen anti-Semitism from Democrats, as you noted, those on the extreme left. We've seen it on the extreme right. And as Jewish communities are grappling with this unprecedented rise of anti-Semitism, they're really scared. So you issued a proclamation condemning anti-Semitism after some incidents in Colorado. I'm interested in how that was received, what sort of responses you got. Was it, are you seeing a bipartisan effort to respond to anti-Semitism in your state? And what else can you do as an executive to protect not just the Jewish community, but all of the communities in your state?
Well, I think it's important to set the tone. We did that through a declaration. We've been in close contact with our universities and others. Of course, in Colorado, we support the values of free speech. And there are many Coloradans, of course, that support a two-state solution, a one-state solution, many different opinions, of course, among Jews themselves, as well as among other Coloradans, among those of Palestinian descent. And it's a great example for disagree better, about how we can actually enter a conversation rather than scream and yell through one another. Very substantially, of course, we also want to make sure that everybody is kept safe, no matter what their opinion is, whether it's on our campuses or on our streets. So we've requested an emergency supplemental for support we have that goes out to protect targeted nonprofits. That could mean synagogues, mosques, for instance, that have threats. We're able to provide state assistance that can go to hardening, adding additional security measures, as most of our synagogues and perhaps some of our mosques have on our university campuses around the Hillels and the Chabad houses. Very important that every Coloradan, regardless of their faith, regardless of their belief on this conflict, is safe and not subject to physical risk of attack. And then it's a matter of saying, how can we get this into a conversation where, and I said this on Face the Nation the other day, the vast majority of Jews and Americans that are pro-Israel also support a Palestinian state. And many people that are pro a Palestinian state also support an independent Jewish state of Israel. So I think there's, again, a conversation to be had. Yes, there's people on the extremes that that don't support those goals, but we have to find a way to create more room for people of good faith to have those conversations.
Thank you. And Governor Cox, can you add to that too, and just speak to what has happened in Utah post October 7th and how you've handled the situation facing the Jewish community in Utah?
Sure. Yeah. And I want to thank Governor Polis for his leadership nationally on this issue. I probably goes without saying that I agree with everything that he just said, but I would add that there is tremendous support here in the state of Utah. Again, on both sides of the aisle, we had a rally shortly after October 7th, where we had almost every Republican and Democratic legislator who joined us. We had many of the Jewish leaders in our state who were present. There were several speeches I was able to speak on in support of our Jewish friends and again our friends in Israel. I took a trade mission to Israel last year. Our relationships there are incredibly strong. In fact, just yesterday, the Consul General of Israel from Los Angeles was here in Utah. His first state visit. He's new on the job. I was grateful that he came to Utah for his first visit outside of California. We had wonderful discussions of support and have delivered that message again and again that we will do everything possible to protect Jewish citizens here in our state. And again, of any faith, the free speech piece is really important, even unpopular speech, and maybe especially unpopular speech. But that can never mean silencing people that you disagree with. I am very worried about the cancel culture that we are seeing on campuses and across our country, and and making sure again that we're protecting those who may be intimidated. And you are also correct that we are seeing this on the extreme right and the extreme left, and it's critical that we do call out our own side, and we're certainly trying to do more of that. And so we want to make sure that Utah is a place where everyone feels safe, and that we are protecting free speech, and we can do both of those things.
I'm so happy this conversation is sort of the balm for our souls that I think many of us need, because there seems to be such a lack of this kind of thoughtful discourse. And I'm thinking, as you're talking, the two of you I hope you will consider doing a roadshow to universities where, as you noted, there is often an inability seemingly to dialogue through difference or to encounter different viewpoints without trying to shut it down. We have to find ways to return to thoughtful disagreement, which again is what you're modeling. You mentioned, Governor Cox, your trip to Israel, and I just want to pick up on that, because one of the ways the National Governors Association describes itself actually feels very similar to the way AJC describes itself, which is you're bipartisan. We say nonpartisan, but the idea is that we work with everybody, and global. And as governors, you are the executives of your state, but you're also working to connect the local to the global and the global to the local. So in addition to a trade mission, can you just talk a little bit about the role of governors, the role of state leaders in helping support things like the Abraham Accords, and carry the message of the importance of some of these international issues and how they impact our communities at home?
Sure. Yeah. Look, we governors routinely take trade missions every year. I think every governor does, and it has been interesting. I will tell you, I was lieutenant governor for almost 8 years before I was governor, and so over the past 10 plus years now, I've seen a real change in the way that this diplomacy is being done. In that, as Congress and our federal government becomes more dysfunctional, more and more countries are looking to the relationships with states to help move those and advance those relationships and those opportunities along. And so Israel, of course, is an important player on the international stage. And we went to Israel for a couple reasons. One, they are experts when it comes to water, and we're living in a drought and in the West and trying to learn from them. Obviously, the tech sector is very important and the trade that is happening there. Israel is known as the startup nation, and we're competing with places like Colorado to be the startup state, and so we wanted to learn from them. But we did something very unique. We didn't just visit Israel. On that same trip, we went to the United Arab Emirates, we went to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. I specifically wanted to learn more about the Abraham Accords because I wasn't sure the media was giving us the best information in our country. I had heard very negative things about the Abraham Accords, mostly, to be honest, just because they were associated with President Trump, and I think there's kind of, could anything good happen there? So I wanted to see. I was absolutely blown away. We later went to Morocco as well, but our time in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, I was stunned at how excited they were. It was the 2-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords, and every government official we met with was just overjoyed at the change that had happened, and they were shocked too. They told us again, our Muslim friends in UAE said, we thought it would take 3 to 5 years for kind of a normalization to occur with Israelis coming to our country. They said it took about 3 weeks. They said when we got together, we realized that we really are family. We're cousins, and the familiarity was unexpected. I think they said they had. Gosh, I can't remember the numbers at the time. This was last year. It was like 300,000 Jewish Israelis that had traveled to the country in those 2 years. They were actually celebrating while we were there. There was a Jewish leader there in a synagogue who was having a wedding, and it was the largest Jewish wedding to ever occur there. There were about 1,500 people at this wedding, split almost equally between Jews and Arabs, and they were dancing together and celebrating together. And I have to tell you, it was glorious to my soul to see what could be, what could happen. The building of the Abraham house there, it wasn't completed yet, but where you have a synagogue and a mosque and a cathedral under one roof. Seeing those sacred texts being displayed together, the oldest version of their text being displayed side by side. Again, I saw a vision of what peace and humanity and brotherhood could actually look like.
It's fabulous. And I am compelled to note that AJC was the first American Jewish organization to open an office in the UAE. We have an AJC Abu Dhabi office that's now been up and running for a few years. So we agree this is so crucial, and continuing to support the Abraham Accords and these significant relationships, even in very difficult, challenging moments as we are in now. There's a lot of complexity, but the Abraham Accords appear to be holding, and we will continue to ensure that they do. Governor Polis, I'd like your thoughts on the nexus between your work as a governor and the role of a state executive, and foreign policy and the role you can play and the voice you have in some of these issues.
Well, I'm not going too far out on a limb to say that part of the goal behind the brutal Hamas attacks of October 7th was to disrupt the Abraham Accords. And it perhaps had some limited success. We hope very temporary in that regard, because I think those bonds are stronger over time. Look, we're focused on disagreeing better. It doesn't mean Governor Cox and I will agree on everything. We're never going to agree on which state has better skiing, because we all know it's Colorado. In addition, we're both covered by the Israeli consulate out of Los Angeles. I think we both feel that Israel will be well served by a mountain area consulate. I think it should be in Denver. Governor Cox might have a different opinion. But nevertheless, it's about really getting to the table around the meaningful conversations about how we can work together where we can and disagree better where we can't. When I was first elected governor of Colorado, I ran on a platform of full-day kindergarten free for every kid, preschool and kindergarten. We had half-day kindergarten. Parents had to pay for full day. My very first call after the election was to a longtime Republican legislator, Jim Wilson of Salida, former superintendent, who had been working and supported full-day kindergarten for years, never could get it through the legislature, whether Democrats or Republicans controlled it. We've had both in recent history. And he was the lead sponsor on the bill. It's very unusual for the major initiative of a new governor who happens to be a Democrat. The major initiative, the lead sponsor, was a Republican, which was a minority party in the state house. We got it done. Colorado kids are able to go to kindergarten. We also put preschool on the ballot, and it passed with 67.8% of the vote. So in the reddest counties in Colorado, the bluest counties, rural, urban Denver, it showed that there was a lot more that united us, namely kids ought to be able to go to preschool than there was in all the divisive rhetoric that exists and is too often is featured in the popular debate.
It's so important. And by the way, if you need anyone to do site visits for both of your beautiful states to see where a future Mountain State Israeli consulate would be located, we would be happy to help.
We'll roll out the red carpet. We're ready.
Okay, fabulous. Governor Cox, picking up on that theme, you noted earlier, and this will be my last question, and then I'll turn it over to Claire for some of our audience questions. But you noted earlier about as we were talking about the way people receive media and information and their sources, that and in the Yair Rosenberg kind of mentality about how the real world isn't quite like that, and Governor Polis just described an instance where despite all of the division that we see and that we are fed through the algorithms on the ground and in reality, there's an enormous amount of bipartisan collaboration happening. I know the composition of Utah is changing, but can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in your state?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The composition of our state is changing. I know there's this perception out there, and I've heard it before that Utah is the most homogenous state or the whitest state. That may have been true 30 or 40 years ago. It's certainly not true now. In fact, we're more diverse than 17 other states out there, including Ohio. I mean, things that may surprise people. I also just have to point out, since he kind of threw the gauntlet down, we got 4 feet of snow last weekend at our ski resorts. People are coming from all over the world to ski. And while we're on the subject, Utah was home to the second Jewish governor in the United States, a surprise to many people. In 1917, the 4th governor of the great state of Utah was Simon Bamberger. I have a friend who's been petitioning to rename the state Jutah, but we're not there yet.
Good luck with that.
We're certainly in competition to have a Mountain West consulate in either of our states. But look, those changing demographics lead to new opportunities in our state, and the bipartisan work is happening, and it never gets the attention of the more controversial topics that are out there. It's happening within the National Governors Association. One thing I do admire about governors, obviously I'm a little biased because I am one, but we actually have to do things. Potholes aren't partisan. We have to accomplish things, and the idea was that states would be the laboratories of democracy, where we would try and fail, and some would do better than others. And I routinely steal ideas from a Democrat in Colorado, and I'm not ashamed of that. When good things happen there, and I know that he takes ideas from us as well, and we really do work closely together. I wish that the nation and the news media could spend a little more time in some of those rooms where we're having those conversations, and to know that in our state house, and I know it's very similar in Governor Polis's as well, although we're a supermajority Republican, about 90% of the bills pass unanimously or near unanimously with deep bipartisan support, and that's very different maybe than what we're seeing in Congress these days, but it's inspiring to me to know that work is still continuing.
That's great. Thank you. Claire, I will turn it to you. I know we have lots of questions.
Thanks, Melanie. Our first one is for both governors, but Governor Polis, I'll start with you. Laura Blaustein in Denver is asking, what role can faith communities play in helping to facilitate the initiative?
Well, Laura, great that you're here from Colorado. I think the faith communities are a very important piece of this. So we recently we've had several under Governor Cox's leadership, several convenings of NGA around Disagree Better. We had one here in Denver. The focus of this one was higher ed, which is very relevant and important. In fact, I want to give a shout out to Colorado State University Global Campus, the first university in the country to have a Disagree Better course that is now open for enrollment. Will start in January next semester. But faith-based institutions are a key part of it too. I hope that every state has something like what we have here, which is an interfaith alliance, which is a forum that brings together not just Muslims, Christians, Jews, but of course, Hindus, Sikhs, really the broader faith community. around these important conversations. And certainly over the last few months, a lot of that has been colored by safety and respect and how we could support one another, especially in the Jewish and the Muslim community in this very difficult time. Faith is a very important piece of the lives of Americans. And so I think that it would be wonderful to see faith leaders seek to be forces of unity and disagree better. Again, it's not about maybe some of them do want to convert other people, but mostly it's about say, okay, maybe I want to convert them, but let's agree to disagree on matters of faith as we always have, and come together as a faith community to support really the health of the community at large.
I agree with Governor Polis. We too have a very large and robust interfaith community here, and it's making a tremendous difference. Maybe I could add just a little different viewpoint on the role of faith. It's something I'm concerned about. If you go back to the 1830s, when Alexis de Tocqueville came and traveled through the United States, he talked about our associations and the way that we bring people together, very unique in the world at that time, that this place was full of associations, and chief among them, he talked a lot about religious association and the way that congregations came together to take care of each other, to take on big projects, build hospitals and schools, and really create community. I do worry that we're losing that across the country. I note that the fastest growing religion in the country right now are the nuns, the NONESs, nuns, no religion. People leaving religion, and I do worry about where we're finding community in maybe unhealthy ways, and the data is very clear on this, going back now a couple decades, that Americans are lonelier than ever before because they don't have those associations, religious or otherwise, as much as they used to, and so sadly, we're finding connection in unhealthy ways. Again, the tribalistic ways. I think I think politics is taking the place of religion in far too many communities. And I used to say that politics was becoming religion for too many people. Now my concern, and this is to answer the question, is that our religions are becoming politics, and politics is infiltrating our congregations in unhealthy ways. Tim Alberta, another writer, actually for The Atlantic, has a book that just came out yesterday or today about the evangelical church and the way that politics has kind of infiltrated that religion. And so my plea to religious leaders, and including my own, the president and prophet of my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, about 7 or 8 months ago, gave a speech called "Peacemakers Needed," and I would encourage you to Google it and look at it. I think it's a blueprint for a way that religious leaders can talk about depolarization and focusing on our religious principles that in every religion almost always are about peace and unity and helping people who are suffering. And I think that translates into almost every religion that I'm aware of, certainly the Jewish faith. And I think there's an opportunity for religious leaders to help the healing that is so necessary in our country today, and try to get the politics in its rightful balance as it's become out of balance over time.
Thank you. Our next question is for you, Governor Cox, from Jason Epstein, who's asking, what can you add about what you're seeing on campuses and in the broader educational sphere? How can we make it okay for young people to hear and process different viewpoints?
Well, thank you for that question. It's something we've been working on. As Governor Polis mentioned, we actually spent a couple days in Colorado really focused on this with experts from all across the country. Melanie asked that maybe we take this on the road, and we did that at Colorado State University. He and I were on stage at CSU, disagreeing better, talking about these very principles. Just this past week, at my encouragement, we've been working with the Board of Higher Education in the state of Utah. They came out with a new set of principles based on what are called the Chicago principles. The University of Chicago several years ago came out with kind of a set of ideals about where universities should be on this issue, and how we can get back to the core of education and truth finding. And so what those principles entail for the state of Utah, and what we've released as a requirement for our public institutions, are one, institutional neutrality for presidents and administrations of institutions. One of the problems I think that really came to a head on October 7th was we've gotten, for whatever reason, and I think they're the wrong reasons, this idea that every university president and every university needs to take a stand on every political issue of the day, except that they only did it mostly leaning in one political direction. And then when October 7th happened, there was sadly quiet across many of our universities who wouldn't come forward to call out the horrific events of that day. And I think that hypocrisy was very noticeable to everyone. And now you've had a backlash on the right too, where they're saying, well, if institutions don't come out in support of Israel, then we need to hold them accountable. I think that's actually problematic as well. What I believe should happen, and what is happening here in Utah, is that institutions should be arbiters of neutrality, that institutions don't have to take and should not. I don't care what my university presidents think about Israel Hamas. I don't care what they think about abortion. I don't care what they think about these things. What I do care about, and this is the second part of this, is that we have free speech on campuses so that we can challenge ideas, so that we can talk about controversial issues and topics, and that people can feel safe doing that. In doing so, and this is where the universities, and Governor Polis has been so good on this, the universities do have a role to protect our students. And if our Jewish students are feeling uncomfortable, if they are feeling attacked, if there are anti-Semitic attacks, if there are calls for retribution, threats of violence, that is unacceptable. And the students, again, this canceling that we've seen happening over the years, where speakers are not allowed to speak on campus, groups aren't allowed to convene on campuses, that cannot stand. We have to be serious about this. And if students are going to participate in that type of behavior, there should be consequences. They should be expelled from our universities. They can protest, and they should protest, but you don't protest by stopping speech on campus. I'm sorry, that's a long answer, but we used to do this very well on our campuses, and we can get back there.
I just want to chime in, Claire, and say we're right there with you. And I'm really excited to hear more about what you're doing in Utah. I just think I think what you just said was really important and interesting. And I think would love to know more about what's happening in Utah. So.
Melanie, this will be the last question before I turn it back to you. And again, this one is for both governors. Many on Zoom are first thanking you both for this important initiative. And they're saying it's great to see governors leading the charge, but it feels like we need it desperately in many other places in American society. Other than to college campuses, as you just mentioned, how do you plan to bring this much needed initiative elsewhere beyond your states? And Governor Polis, we'll start with you.
Go ahead, Jared. Yeah.
Well, certainly we acknowledge both the assets and the limitations of governors. And I've had this conversation with Governor Cox and others. Of course, governors are important. We're the executives of our state. We can add substance and gravitas to this conversation. We also fully understand that we're not the movers and shakers of popular culture, and that people don't flock to the cause that's led by the governor. So I think what our goal is to do is to try to engage with broader culture as we can. And we're having these conversations. Governor Cox might be able to go into a little bit more detail about how we can make an impact on popular culture. Certainly, we're doing the conventional media, the social media. We've encouraged people of both parties to get together in states, governors with their majority or minority leaders of another party, have these conversations. I think this goes down to the level closest to home about how you have a Thanksgiving dinner with your MAGA uncle and your woke niece. And we talked about that. And Governor Cox and I even had a little ad that we put out around us having lunch together. So again, we can help bring this conversation into the American mainstream. But yes, we need help. And that means help of nonprofits like AJC, but also many others in broader culture, office holders at all levels, people and their families. For this to work, it can't just be governors disagreeing better. It needs to really have a ripple effect that makes that have a more positive impact across broader society.
That's exactly right. Governor Polis said it so well. We are working with some pop culture stars out there. We're hopeful to get their engagement. Stay tuned on that one. We've recorded an ad together, and we would encourage you to visit that. We have several governors that are doing these ads. They're very powerful, and I can say that Harvard has used some of these ads in some experiments and found that they really do do have a great depolarizing effect that is measurable. And the good news is there are lots of organizations out there that are doing this work. It's not just us. We're trying to elevate those groups and help them as well. I would encourage you all to visit the National Governors Association website, nga.org. You can find some of those ads and share some of those ads. Again, there will be much more coming in this space over the next few months. We're hoping to get people involved in their own spheres. Look, politics is downstream of culture, and we know that politicians aren't going to change this. Our politicians are a reflection of we the people. We're hoping to get more people engaged in doing this. You know, imagine kind of a viral campaign on using social media for good on Facebook or X or Instagram, where you sit down with somebody that you disagree with. You know, if you're a Democrat, you sit down with a Republican. You have some conversations and record those conversations and share them with your friends and family, exhibiting ways that we can do this without tearing each other apart. This is part of the fabric of who we are as the most pluralistic society in the history of the world, and we're in danger of losing that if we don't figure this out. And I'm grateful for AJC and other organizations like Braver Angels and Common Ground and others that are doing this work.
Thank you, Melanie. Back to you.
Well, I am energized by this conversation. I am so grateful to you both for your leadership and for not only envisioning this future for our country, but modeling the behavior so beautifully and for leading so effectively. This is exactly, I think, what we need. And to both of you, just know that AJC stands ready to partner with you to elevate your voices, to ensure that this message is reaching wider audiences, because it is exactly what we need in this moment. So I want to thank you both for your time as we enter this holiday season. I want to wish everyone happy holidays. We continue to send our thoughts to our friends and colleagues in Israel, and are praying for the return of hostages. But just want to express our gratitude to both of you for all that you're doing, and for your extraordinary leadership.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, governors, for sharing your insights with us today, and thank you to our global audience for tuning in. You can learn more about this important initiative at nga.org/disagreebetter. If you'd like to join American Jewish Committee in standing up for Israel and standing against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate, please consider making a year-end donation to AJC. If you make your gift before December 31st, it will be doubled. You can visit ajc.org/donate. Thank you again, and goodbye.